Good morning. I'm Katie Campbell from the Sandwich Glass Museum here with Dorothy Hogan Schofield, our curator, welcoming you to our new exhibition, Cutting Edge, A New Perspective in Glass. Dorothy, tell us a little bit about what prompted this exhibit.
Well, we were looking for a theme for our summer exhibition. We've always talked about doing something sculptural, and then we came across the idea of glass used with other forms, such as metal or wood or stone. And then looking to our collection, we actually have a couple of pieces, particularly one piece of a hand, which actually looks very contemporary, although it was made in 1850. And it has a wooden heart and a marble base. So that's our inspiration from the sandwich collection. But it's fun thinking about what the art is like today and how artists are interpreting glass in new and different ways, which is kind of the theme for this exhibit.
Now, I think I've heard that that's called glass secessionism. Is that right?
Yes.
So it's going from a factory-based glass production to art-based, if you will, out of the sort of art school, part of the new studio movement that happened in the 60s, all that kind of thing,
Yeah,
right?
It started to grow from, I guess 1862 was the first time that glass was kind of able to be melted in a small setting, in a studio setting. It was actually at the Toledo Museum of Art, and they kind of, Harvey Littleton and Dominic Labino came up with a way to make a small pot, so that they can melt the glass. And Dominic Labino made a glass formula where it could be melted in that type of circumstance. So taking the whole glass out of the factory into small studios and letting artists actually use the glass to make what they wanted to create. So as a medium, as opposed to just factory-based and utilitarian.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Sandwich is famous for the Boston and Sandwich Glass Company, which came here in 1825, a factory, if you will. What makes this an appropriate exhibit for this museum?
Well, I think it's taking it to the next step. We're Sandwich, although it was a hub, especially in the 1850s, one of the largest glass factories in the world, and then unfortunately kind of faded when a lot of the glass companies started to move to the South and Midwest. But towards the end of production, they started to experiment with art glass, and they did, the last time hot glass was actually made in Sandwich was in 1907, and it was the Alta Manufacturing Company, and they produced this art glass called Trevase, which is very reminiscent of Tiffany. And then there was kind of a lull, and then in the 1980s, or even 70s, I would want to say, Pearpoint started in Sagamore, so glass kind of slowly started to drift back into the area. Now we have two glass studios in Sandwich, McDermott as a glass studio, as well as the glass studio on Cape Cod, which is Michael Magyar, which is in East Sandwich. So I think it's just that continuation and wanting to go forward with what's happening in glass today.
In Sandwich.
In
so
Sandwich,
legitimately,
exactly.
It is Sandwich Glass. It's just not the Boston and Sandwich Glass Company.
That's correct, right.
All right. Well, I think this is very exciting, and definitely some of these pieces are unexpected, whimsical, powerful, and have many, many mediums incorporated with the glass, as we talked about. Let's talk about this piece right here, because this is certainly one of the showstoppers. This is a piece by who?
Stephen Knapp.
Okay.
Stephen Knapp doesn't consider himself really a glass artist, but a light artist. And he uses light through glass, dichroic glass, as well as other types of glass. And by angling the glass as well as the light can bring forth all these beams of color. So as I say, he thinks of himself as a light artist, and these are light paintings, and with glass as part of what he does, which I think is just fascinating.
Show us what happens when you block the light. So it looks like clear glass on a white panel to anybody, and then you let the light show, and then the color explodes, which is really very, very cool. And this is like a proprietary way that he does this glass, right? He's one of the few people that does this light painting.
Yes.
Yeah, and this particular piece is Southern Retreat.
Right, and we have another one called Penny Candy, which is a little bolder in color. What's interesting about his work too is this is done on a panel, but he does building installations where there's actually the individual glass pieces are mounted on walls for big installations. And one locally is at the library at Worcester Polytech. And so you can see on the front of the building, you know, this kind of explosion of light, which is very appropriate for Worcester Polytech. so he, as I say, very, very famous for this type of work, and has installations all over the United States and the world.
Okay, well, let's talk about William Carlson.
Bill Carlson started life, you know, in the glass field, but also taught glassmaking to a number of glass artists. He was in Ohio initially.
Right. He started the Cleveland Institute of Art's glass program. That's correct.
Yeah, and then is now in Miami, I believe. And he's does these. What's big right now is glass has always kind of been blown. Like for example, Stephen Knapp's work is what we call cold working. And hot glass making is when you actually take the glass, blow it out, and make a form. But artists are kind of going into different directions with this. An old technique is called pâte de verre, and that is basically casting glass. And that's what Bill did with his work, is multiple pieces in which he casts the glass, and you look at his work and it looks like knots of rope kind of tied. He calls his piece Notice, and that are tied in various forms. But then when you actually look at the glass, there's no rope in there. It's just that it's been cast, and that's how you get that kind of effect of the rope. Debbie Tarsitano is another one who does pâte de verre, and where it's kind of also known as sometimes the lost wax process, and where she makes a mold, and then from the mold first she makes I want to say a sculpture, then it's cast in a mold, and from the mold they get a piece in wax usually, and they put plaster over the wax, take the wax out. It's very complicated, and now you have this plaster casting of almost a mold, and then you either pour the glass in, or you can put frit in, which are just like chunks of glass, and that melts. And then they have to chip away the plaster. But what kind of effect you get is that the glass almost has a waxy kind of look to it, and that's how they achieve that. It's like a softer look, not the hard edges. And she did two fascinating pieces, Debbie did, and her one is called The Night Blooming Dahlia, and where she was inspired about going out into her garden at night. It's a huge white flower on a dark canvas, and how the almost like dahlia kind of glowed in the dark, and so that was her inspiration for that. Her second piece consists of a large glass heart on a canvas, and it's called No More Hurting People, and it was dedicated to Richard Martin, who died during the bombings on the day of Marathon bombings. Mm-hmm. Yes. And she was so compelled by his story that she had to create something in honor of him. And her heart is like what she calls a healing heart, although broken in a way. It's a healing heart. And on it, she put her heart on a canvas that's reminiscent of a T train, the Green Line. And on there, she has No More Hurting People, as if a graffiti artist had come along and wrote that on the train. And so that's her kind of interpretation of kind of the healing of Boston. So it was, as I say, very moving piece. It's moved a lot of people. I mean,
it is very powerful.
Yeah, it is a very powerful piece.
One of the things that I really like about Debbie's work is, unlike any of the other pieces, she incorporates her painting with the pâte de verre glass, which is not only makes a very heavy piece, but a very tactile piece, because you've got the glass that has this sort of waxy appearance, and then she uses different kinds of paint, but I think mostly oil, right? And so the juxtaposition of those textures it makes you just want to touch it.
Yeah.
Don't touch it, but yes, but it looks like you want to touch it.
Yeah, and it pops right off the canvas, which is really nice too.
So, so then we talk about people who move in a little bit more organic way,
Yes.
like Robin Greevy,
Yes.
who's a Chatham artist. And what can you tell me about her work?
Well, she is well known for her almost figural pieces, or her half bust forms, and she's changing her focus, and she's trying to. When you look at her sculptures, you think of Mother Nature, and she incorporates leaves and drawings of trees and pieces into her art, which is again a woman's form, headless, but kind of nature inspired, and Mother Nature is what really comes to mind with her pieces. Again, she casts objects too, as well as Christina Bothwell, and her forms are even more creative, and she uses not more creative, I shouldn't say that, different though, in that she uses found objects to her cast, added to her cast forms. So she has this wonderful piece called a toy, which is a duck, like a duck pull toy, which you use stickers and airplane parts and all sorts of interesting things to make the form. And then she has Dreaming of Horses, which is almost like a young girl thinking of a horse, or becoming a horse, and she incorporates all sorts of pearls and light bulbs and like ideas coming off and all sorts of interesting objects onto her pieces. So as I say, they're using the glass in such a different way. Another artist, Tom Schoon, his pieces are quite large and very organic, and that he uses cast glass for the heavy base of his sculptures, and then stone forms the body, and glass is the shoulder, and then stone for the head. But they're basically they're my height, and just really powerful pieces when you look at them.
And they're two human forms, or
three human forms. Yes, because it's almost like we think of it as different ways, and how he interprets it is probably something else. But the most common interpretation is man and a wife and a child.
Right.
So so they're very interesting also.
So all right, so we've got glass and wood, glass and paint, glass and light, glass. How about glass and paper?
Yeah, an unusual combination, but Eric Demain and Martin Demain, father and son team, they're out of the MIT Glass Lab in Cambridge, and what they have done is they've blown glass forms, and Eric is a mathematician and into dimensional thinking, and so he does these kind of origami type paper,
but not like
sculptures.
No origami you've ever seen.
No.
One of which, because there's no angles.
It's all
rounded.
all rounded, no edges really,
right.
Rounded forms, and then incorporated into the glass, almost like a ship in the bottle. They describe it.
Right.
And how they do that, we don't know, but it's really fascinating. And then the other thing they're kind of doing that's very interesting too, again using paper, is by what they call a pyro print, and they take the paper and then drip glass, and however it goes onto this paper, it leaves kind of a burn mark, and very organic kind of looking form, and just kind of a fun way to express their art for that type of thing.
When I saw that, it reminded me of like a Rorschach test or something.
Yeah.
Like, okay, and now you get to interpret this in any sort of weird way that you want.
Well,
so I really like it.
Yeah, because people look at it and say, oh, there's a face, and this is a horse, or this is a bird, exactly.
And when I talked to Martin Demain, they have it on the back of the frame. They have it hung either vertically or horizontally. So there's no right way to interpret it. I mean, you can look at it either way, and make of it what you will. Yeah. It's really very fun.
Yeah, it is a fun piece.
Sidney Hutter.
Sidney Hutter goes back to the cold working, and where he cuts glass into various forms. He's very famous for his vase forms, one of which we have just as you enter the exhibit. But he's done these new things called transmission. We have transmission number 7 and transmission number 9. and they are just fascinating. He uses color and glues and makes these kind of, what I want to say, pinwheel forms that when you look at them one way, they look like one thing. You have a burst of color. You look at them sideways, and you would swear that it's just all clear glass.
And is that dichroic, or is that just like iridescent? Or?
It's some sort of iridescence that he uses in between the layers of colorless glass. So, and then from there, we go to Peter Hauk, who is the head of the MIT Glass Lab, and he has a piece in the exhibit called Book. And the book is actually pages, glass pages, with a spine of like a tree branch. And inside the glass pages are just etchings or engravings of different things. We don't know what.
Well, it seems very mechanical.
Yeah,
in
very
nature.
mechanical nature, which
Right.
kind of goes with the inorganic, or the opposite of the inorganic, the organic edges of the plates or pages,
Right.
and the organic edge, a spine of the book.
Right.
So, but then his other piece is we go back to the hot glass. And he made a vase, and which he calls Big Dig Tacoma. And on the vase are painted cranes and trees reminiscent of the Big Dig. He was inspired by the Big Dig in Boston. And so so all that activity is all on this vase, and it's a 360. And as you look at it one way, you get one interpretation. Look at it from another, totally different. So fascinating piece.
Well, and the way it's lined up, you can look at one picture on the front of the vase, but you see the echo of the back of something else on the back of the vase. So again, 360 times 2 almost,
Yeah.
because you're getting
All those,
multiple
yeah.
multiple views,
Yeah,
right?
and all those images. Another example, several other examples of hot glass from McDermott's Glass Studios and in collaboration with Brian Volkhausen, another artist in
He's a
sandwich.
metal worker, right?
A metal worker. And what he did is he interpreted the figure Cocopelli and into metal, and then David added glass elements to this piece. The same with the butterfly. The butterfly has a wood frame with a metal wings, but with a glass body. So incorporating those two, and so so we have the metal work as well as that. Another piece that kind of is along that line is Ed Branson. We have his curled frond, which again hot glass to make the frond, but it sits into a metal base. And then we have also
Michael Magyar.
Michael, thank you. But that's not who I was thinking.
Oh, okay.
But Michael, yes, our local glass blower. And as well as Light Drop,
Right.
which is the piece that as you enter the exhibit is highlighted. And then as you enter the museum, we have Storm Dance, which is
Midnight
fascinating.
Storm Dance,
yeah,
yes.
which is fascinating because he uses glass. It looks like rain has fallen and bounced up with the earth in between, and then with the water down below. It's very, very organic.
Right.
Very
So
fun.
all of Michael's pieces are also illuminated.
Yes.
So he's got the very textural concrete, dyed concrete, poured concrete, the glass, and then the light. So it's those pieces are very powerful, and again, heavy, but very they really sort of make a statement.
Yeah. Along with Benton Jones.
Benton Jones,
but,
yes.
who I don't want to forget, is he has several pieces. He's, again, very nature-inspired. The ocean is, I think, a big part of what he interprets.
He's a Brewster artist,
Yes,
correct?
he is. And there's one piece he calls Ocean Gyre, and gyre refers to the circular currents that occur naturally in the ocean and kind of what stirs up. So one of his pieces, and it has metal in between the glass.
Is that the
which is
brass and glass?
Yeah, he's kind of slumped that all together. Then he has
Chemosynthesis.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Which is life forms being down in the depths of the ocean and how they transpire, and so his interpretation of that. And he took spheres from the Oceanographic Institute and kind of melted those and shaped those, and that kind of forms their top part of his sculpture with metal down below, and then which are stuck into stone, which kind of represents the ocean floor. So very, very fascinating pieces.
And then what about his last piece?
Skyward,
yes,
which is almost like a vase form, which actually he made flat, and then while still hot, raised up the side pieces to form his vase form, again, which sits into a metal stand. So very, very interesting work, and nice that it's another local artist.
And then perhaps the biggest piece that we have is the piece by Ricky Bernstein.
Oh, Ricky. Now, Ricky is, again, cold working. He is very whimsical. We had an exhibit here of his work a few years ago.
2011.
And he's, as I say, very, very whimsical, takes stories from his childhood and interprets them in glass, but he also uses paint and color, and it's almost, he refers to himself sometimes as a cartoonist, and almost a cartoon form of usually the juggling many different balls in the air type of deal, and so and interprets that kind of frantic nature of life into his artwork, which is very colorful, very powerful.
I think for me, one of the interesting things about Ricky's work is, on the surface, it's very fun, but when you see the engineering that goes on behind it, this is layers and layers of glass that are juxtaposed to each other to make this sort of, it's a 3D dimensional kind of.
It's not flat.
It's not flat at all.
No, so it looks almost like a painting, but it is 3D. It's very dimensional, and how he does it.
That's also really, really heavy.
Yeah.
Excellent.
They're not delicate.
Exactly.
Actually, none of it is. None of it is delicate work. Very intricate work, and fascinating work, but I would not call any of it delicate in a way. Maybe Christina Bothwell's, maybe Robin Greby's work a little bit in the softness of it, but none of it is, they're all standalone, all very powerful works.
All right, so let's talk about the last piece, Michael Glancy's piece, which is called...
I always want to say something totally different, but his piece reminds me of space.
Right.
And growing up with Star Trek and
it's called Global Guardian.
Global Guardian, so it does kind of fit that bill, but but having, as I say, for me, it represents space.
Let's talk about the technique, though, of his. His is very different from everybody else's.
Yeah, in that he uses metal and castings and all sorts of his piece. He's fascinating.
Something relief. I've forgotten what they call that technique when they put the metal in and they carve out the glass.
It could be intaglio or.
That's it.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, and so that's how he does his. His piece is fascinating. Again, a well-known artist locally, nationally, and internationally. He's very famous in Japan, along with Sid Hutter is another artist who's very famous in Japan. They love their work.
So that's pretty much the pieces that we're showing for this particular exhibit. I'm very excited about the direction that we're going. What do you want people to take away from this exhibit?
Well, that glass, although when you come into the museum, you're thinking of utilitarian forms. We see Alex, our glass blower, at the museum, making maybe goblets or vases. So we even still see that, here and what was being done. But it's so exciting to see the glass move forward, to see it being used in different ways. As an artist interprets paint, he's interpreting glass to make beautiful forms. So I think that's probably what I would like to have people come and take away with. Is just the idea of there's beauty in glass. We look out the big window of the museum and see all the beautiful colors that Sandwich did, and then you look at some of the cut glass of the later period and the brilliance and the sparkle of that. But you still see it here.
Right.
You still want to, still want to touch it. You still want to figure how do they make that. There's still the ingenuity's there. The art is there, I think that's kind of, what do you want people
No,
to
and
come up with?
I agree. For me, the evolution of glass from something, as you said, completely utilitarian into something that is just for your out and out enjoyment and for the artist's ability to express themselves is fascinating. And I think we're sort of in a unique position that we can sort of show that evolution in its entirety when you walk through the museum. And I hope when people leave this particular exhibit, they think, wow, A, I didn't know you could do that with glass. B, that's so cool because I've never seen anything like that. And and maybe this is a kind of movement that I can get behind. The industry has changed so much.
The hot glass making in the United States has almost disappeared. You have a few, even the factories are going. So you see a few factories, and even the glass artists are sometimes having a difficult time trying to keep it up. So to actually see it thrive maybe in our area, I think is so important, because it might be something that it might be fading just from the expense of things and trying to start up. We had in '62 there was the early movement to broaden broaden the glass field and start to reinterpret things. But it's sadly, I think it's kind of maybe fading away, and it's because young artists aren't maybe given the opportunity to be able to start up their own studios as you could early on. And fortunately, some of our younger glass artists are working with Michael Magyar and David McDermott, and Benton Jones, who actually teaches glass in Prague. But it's just, trying to keep it moving forward. And I think that should be part of our goal, is trying to keep it moving forward.
And I guess the last thing I would say as a takeaway for me is I want people to appreciate how time-consuming, how meaningful this work is.
Diverse.
Yeah. Sometimes people will walk in and say, well, why is this, this blob of glass worth, X number of dollars? The reason that it's somebody's art that they've spent a lot of time thinking about and changing, and I want people to understand that's why we support the artists, and we want you to buy this instead of the Chinese tumblers that cost $1 at Target. We want to explain, if you get a piece of hand-blown glass, there's so much more that goes into that than what you get from it.
Yeah, that's so true. And just thinking of the students, that are coming out of the universities today, but also how much time is involved. For example, Alex, our glass blower, has been doing this for about 4 years now, and he still thinks of himself as a beginner. So it takes a lot of time to be able to manipulate the glass to get it to do what you want it to do.
Consistently.
Yes, exactly. And so you're also, when you look at an artist's work, there's also all this time involved in order for him to be able to produce the beautiful sculpture or the beautiful glass. It took him years in order to perfect that form. So you have to respect the work.
So please come see Cutting Edge. It is open from July 1st to October 25th, 9:30 to 5. We hope to see you then. Thank you.